Hi, I'm Gene Bergman, and we are right now on Burlington Progressives TV, and I am the Ward 2 City Councilor and the host for this show, and I am so pleased to be here with Lena Greenberg and Dan Castrogano and Joe Kane. They are three candidates for City Council, and I am just going to try to navigate us in the conversation so that you get a chance to speak to people in your wards and also in the city as a whole and each other. And let's start with you, Lena. Why don't you just try to introduce yourself, give us a brief personal and political history?
Sure thing. Thanks, Gene. Glad to be here today. My name is Lena Greenberg. I use they, them pronouns. I am running for Ward 5 City Council because I care about my neighbors and I want to see Burlington thrive, I think, with a compassionate and energetic and focused, ambitious City Council. We can get there. I am really concerned about public safety, about affordable housing, about the climate crisis. There's so much we can do to take care of our neighbors, and we're not doing it. We need to get to work. We have seen a lot of stalemate in City Council, and what I really want to see is us prioritize urgent action on things like reducing the demand for drugs in our city, which I think will make a big dent in crime and will keep our neighbors more safe, no matter their circumstance, whether you're in a home that you own or if you're sleeping in a tent. We need to make big moves on the climate crisis. The clock is not waiting for us to get our political act together. We really need to move on counting our emissions and thinking about how to make good on that promise to weatherize rental units and make it possible for folks to navigate this really challenging climate time in a way that doesn't put undue financial burden on them. We also need to make moves on new housing. I am in the ward with the South End Innovation District. I want to see that be affordable housing that turns into a community and a real neighborhood, not a place for luxury condos. And someone said to me, selling the soul of the South End. I want us to keep the soul of the South End. I grew up in New York City. I watched my neighborhood get totally destroyed by development, and I don't want to see that happen in Burlington. I want to live here for a long time. So bringing all of that intention and energy to this race, and really glad to have the opportunity to serve my community.
Great. We'll have a chance to explore a little bit more of all of that, the platform and also your personal history. It sounds really interesting. Dan,
Gene,
tell us about, nice to see you again. Tell us about yourself. Dan and I go back. We've organized a bit in this community. And so why don't you give us a little brief personal history and political history, and to the extent to which you want to also raise the political issues of why you're running, that would be great.
Cool. Thanks, Gene. Yeah, and good to sit between Lena and Joe, fellow organizers and folks stepping up to run for City Council. My name is Dan Castrogano. I use he, him pronouns. I'm running in Ward 4 as a progressive for City Council. I'm a teacher, I'm a dad, I live with my partner and my son in the New North End. I've been teaching for about 15 years, and that's what I do. Right now I work with high school aged kids and love what I do. The last 6 of my 7 years or so have been working specifically on climate education, both in the classroom, so teaching a lot of middle school kids and high school students about the climate emergency and what we have to do, and then spending a couple of years coaching teachers on how to teach about the climate emergency. So, and I'm choosing to step up into this race because I care a lot about our city. I love Burlington. My family loves Burlington, and have been organizing since I got here around things like climate and transportation and housing, and just see these series of crises in our city. And we use the term crisis, right? So for climate crisis, for housing crisis, for substance use, for safety, right? And see the city not responding at the level appropriate for these crises that we are facing.
So do you have an example of some of the organizing that you've done?
Yeah, definitely.
Give me a real highlight.
A real highlight. Gene, you and I worked together at first. The city of the Burlington International Airport wanted to expand 11 more acres into the working class neighborhood, the Chamberlain neighborhood of South Burlington, to expand the footprint of the airport, which means, you know, more flights, more emissions, more noise, and then the destruction of the continued destruction of more housing, sort of creeping into that neighborhood, and how that impacts everybody. So organizing against that, and we were able to win that organizing fight. Just care deeply about workers, about families, about children, and organize a lot around things like climate and things like housing and transportation justice.
Yeah, I got to tell you, Dan, that it was a pleasure to work with you. I would love to be on the city council with all of you. Dan brought such value to that fight, and I think that we saved a neighborhood, at least the remnants of a neighborhood. You were talking, Lynn, about gentrification and displacement in New York, and we'll go back to that and the similarities. But it's so important that we have people who are coming in who are not bureaucrats, but are really working to organize folks and have that learned experience. Joe, hi. So nice to see you again. We've seen each other at the NPA and around some important international issues, and I wonder if you could just introduce yourself, personal history, and your political history, and the extent to which it bleeds into the reasons that you're running, by all means, within the short period of time we got.
Yeah, for sure. It's nice to be here with you all. I'm proud to be on this slate with other progressives who do good work in the community. I'm running because I think the progressives have done great work in the city for decades, and I'd like to continue that tradition. I also am running because I watch the meetings, and the city council meetings, that is, and the meetings are very frustrating. I think there's a lack of urgency on council. There's a tendency to kind of kick the can down the road on urgent issues, climate, housing, tax policy. I think there are real democratic process issues as well. I'd like to see counselors paid more. I'd like to see publicly funded elections. I would like to see Burlington continue its long and storied history of providing, international solidarity, solidarity more broadly than just within the city. As in the issue going on in Palestine, we collected signatures for an anti-apartheid pledge that we failed to get on the ballot. One of the several instances.
But not for lack of signatures.
Yeah, right. It was a democratic process issue where one of, I think, 3 items at least that a lot of people worked hard to get on the ballot for this March that is not going to be on the ballot because of I think real issues with democratic process in the city. I have a background as an economist, as a professor. I've done research in housing policy, health policy, environmental policy. I'm a labor economist. I work at the Bureau of Labor Statistics right now, calculating the unemployment rate. And I've been teaching students for many years what good and bad economic policy looks like, and I have a lot of ideas. I think I could, jump in from day one and introduce agenda items that would move city policy forward.
That would be helpful. I'd love to serve on a city council with an economist who is coming from a progressive point of view. We're going to be going through a budget that is going to be tough, to say the least. We need to be able to figure out how to build more housing, how to stabilize rents, for example. So having your expertise would be really great. Let's turn back and try to blend a little bit more of your reflections on growing up and your activism and your community service, because I know that you're on the MPA, for example, and its relationship with the reasons that you're running. Sort of like blend that a little bit more for me.
Sure thing. What I learned as a little kid is still true. When we let developers make the rules, we lose our communities. And we can't afford to do that in Burlington. We need more housing. And we need housing that people can afford and want to live in. One of the things I've heard from folks when knocking on doors is people go out of their way to renovate their home and make it more housing for friends or for family members. they're trying to add an ADU in their backyard, and instead of getting support from the city, they're faced with permitting and hurdles that they have to clear. I think helping folks be developers at a small scale will both preserve the beautiful character of our neighborhoods. I love the South End. I love the way it feels to walk through the South End and bike through the South End. And I don't want to lose that. And I think supporting folks in doing that infill development work really will kind of pave a way out of this crisis for us. I know that when we get together and try to figure things out, we do better than when folks tell us what to do or when developers tell us what to do. At the NPA, I've watched people who I never would have met otherwise come together and say, oh, here's a problem. Let's think creatively about how to fix it and see movement. I've been attending and watching the city council meetings for months and seeing that we're kind of stuck in this stalemate. When we can't make decisions, we can't deliver for people. And when we bring people together, we are able to find consensus, and then we can make decisions. I really value the work of facilitation and collaboration. I've done a lot of that work in the climate field and in the food access and food justice field as a communications professional. Trying to find a way forward when it feels like we're stuck is really natural to me and seems like some of the energy we need on the council.
Okay. So last night we had the neighborhood code come before us. I don't know the answer to this. It's always hard to ask questions that you don't know the answer to and be out of control. But be that as it may, one of the arguments for the neighborhood code or in the promotion for the time frame that we're being asked to do that is that there was a tremendous amount of public process. So did the neighborhood code, which is purportedly to do much of what you're talking about in terms of helping people develop their properties and infill development, did that come to the Ward 5 NPA? And just give me some of your reflections on that all.
Yeah, I loved hearing about neighborhood code at the NPA. We had a really great meeting. There was a meeting right before our NPA that was about the South End Innovation District, so it was a nice kind of lumped opportunity for folks to just come to the Department of Public Works one time on one afternoon and get the full slate of information about development in our neighborhood. It was great to see people engage on that. One of the things I'd really like to see in the future of our city and our city council is that people don't feel like their voices are getting heard. And I know that there are so many community plans for, I don't even know what it's called, the Pit, City Place, excuse me.
No, the Pit is a good
There
name.
was a beautiful community plan for that. There was plenty of input and resistance to the Champlain Parkway, which has transformed the South End neighborhood forever. We have to live with the legacy of bad planning decisions, and people have good ideas. I want to see there be less of a difference between what people want for their community and what actually gets pushed forward through city council. And I think the neighborhood code has the planning department has done really good due diligence on shopping it around to NPAs and showing up at community-led events. And I want to make sure that we can really arrive with that we're not just saying we're doing public input and then letting things fall apart afterwards. Zoning is an amazing tool. It's slow. We're not bulldozing neighborhoods just because we upzone them. We're actually saying, here's a possibility. Here's potential for us to develop. There's going to be so many more steps, so many more ways we have to approve developments. And I appreciate the way the neighborhood code has kind of unfolded.
Well, that's helpful for me because they are going, no, I say that because I've been focused on other things like climate. And so I have not focused on that, and one of the complaints has been that at least in Ward 1 in the Hill section, there hasn't been that type of engagement. So
there's always room for more engagement, right? And I think that if we can make the engagement happen throughout the process, we have fewer problems like that.
That is perfect. Dan, there are issues that prompted you to run?
Yes. Yes, there are.
Why did you decide to run now?
Like I said before, just these series of crises and like where the crisis is and then the proposed solutions or the implemented solutions don't match the crisis.
So give me some examples.
Yeah, so on climate we have to get to zero emissions as quickly as possible. The 2019 net zero energy roadmap is flawed. We have to rewrite it. It doesn't count the two biggest polluters that are owned and operated by the city of Burlington, which is McNeil Generating Station and the airport. Right? We need a realistic plan to get to zero emissions as fast as we can. That's one. The second one is, my platform is transportation justice and safe streets. So the ability for everybody to get around the city however they want. So walk, bike, roll, public transit, or drive. And everybody should have the freedom to do that. And if we build these robust systems, especially for walking, biking, rolling, and public transit, then it makes getting around the city and through the city better for everybody, even if you're driving a car. So that means like bus shelters and bus stations, that means protected bike lanes, that means implementing with quick build infrastructure and volunteers the 2017 Plan BTV Walk Bike Plan, which is just woefully out of date. It's just not even close to where we should be. So that's some on that. And then housing is we need more housing, like Lena was saying. Building housing in the biggest city in Vermont is good, and it solves both the climate and housing crises at the same time. I think neighborhood code is good. I think it doesn't go as far as it should go. There are certain neighborhoods that are still designated as RL, and I know that was discussed last night, is that at the very least, everything should be brought up to RM.
Including the new North End and the South End, which I think have been left at RL for the most part, which is, I think, the rub that I heard last night, where the pushback has been Ward 1 as opposed to really upzoning in the other zones.
Yeah, and the goal is to legalize housing, right? We have to legalize housing, and both of our opponents actually in one of the neighborhood code meetings said, let's keep it restrictive zoning. And so that and the ability to have mixed use, right? So the goal of a city is to have mixed use, and that means residential and commercial. And it doesn't mean like an industrial ironworks, but it means like on my street or like throughout the whole city of Burlington, having the ability to have a cafe or a bakery or a barber shop there. And so it solves the housing crisis, solves the climate crisis, takes a step forward for the climate crisis, because the two biggest sources of pollution are buildings and cars. Right? So if you build more densely and people drive less, we're more socially connected, it's more joyful, and you can get around however you want. And sort of like leaning into the next era of Burlington. And then wanted to touch on what Lena was saying too about just process and sort of how the city rolls things out, and like what public engagement looks like. And wants to actually listen to people and not just corporate interest and special interests. And if you're checking the public engagement box, just let us know. If this is the plan and these are the things that aren't gonna change, like the Burlington-Winooski Bridge, 4 lanes and they're gonna widen the lanes, faster travel speeds, more traffic violence, louder, lots of stuff like that, then just tell us at the beginning. And so that the public process is robust and actually is meaningful.
Dog and pony shows are not your idea of public
it's a waste
engagement.
of time. It's a waste of everybody's time.
Yeah.
So
I hear you.
That's what I think.
And Joe, you're running now. Why?
Well, I have the same vision, I think, that Dan and Lena have. For a city that is a nicer place to live and it's where it's easier to get around, where ordinary folks are footing less of the bill. There was a reappraisal process in 2021 that shifted the burden onto residential to some extent from commercial because of lower revenues during COVID. We have a woefully out-of-date tax code where we have a completely flat property tax system. Buildings get taxed how they get taxed. Residential structures, that is, get taxed how they get taxed, regardless of who owns them or how they're used. Progressives, including our mayoral candidate, Emma Mulvaney-Stanek, are running on making that progressive. So income-based, occupancy-based, just like the state does to finance the education system. I would also be in favor of a vacancy tax, which is something that Democratic mayoral candidate, former mayoral candidate C.D. Madison advocated for. I think we need a land value tax. Right now we have disincentives for development because if you improve the value of your home. If you add an ADU, your assessment will go up, and your tax bill will also go up. If we just tax the land, we don't disincentivize development. That would go a long way towards helping with the housing crisis. Obviously, most of the revenue for the city comes from property taxes, comes from taxes, and the tax code being regressive is surprising, I think, for a city that is known to be or has a reputation for being progressive. And so I'd like to, update the tax code, and I really think we need democratic process reforms that I'm just concerned will not happen, if progressives don't have a strong voice on council.
Talk to us about those democratic reforms, the process reforms.
Yeah, so I think we need a whole host of them. So at the governor, lieutenant governor level, there is public campaign financing, but it's limited. It doesn't go up to match the financing that somebody, a well-financed candidate who's not taking the financing, might receive. So we have a limited public financing system at the highest levels of government in the state. We could extend it downward. Other states and other cities have. So, for instance, Portland, Maine allows at the city council level, even down to the school board level, if you solicit small donations, $55 donations in Portland, Maine, then you unlock $4,000 of public funds. That would make it much easier for us to have a representative government. Some city councils, many city councils around the country, treat it like a job. They pay people enough for it to be their job, and what do you know? They get diverse, young, balanced in terms of gender and background city councils that take up the issues that we care about. So I think it's unlikely that we're going to see progress on environmental issues, on housing issues, the tax code, until we reform our democratic process.
Well, and all of you are young working people, and this is good. I'm an old retired guy, so this is good as well, but it does speak to the difficulties that come and the lived experiences, not only of what you have lived, but what you are living and experiencing, that we need to have, let alone the energy that it takes to run as a city council and to be a city councilor. So let's talk about what you're hearing out on the campaign trail, and then let's just leave it at that. What are you hearing?
Plenty to say about that.
Good.
The first thing I hear at the door is folks are struggling to stay afloat. People are really having a hard time paying the bills, whether they are in Burlington Housing Authority housing or if they're in a home that they own. I've heard from folks across the economic spectrum that it's really hard to think about staying in Burlington, which is really, really sad. We need people. We make up a beautiful community because of the folks who are here, the folks who are committed to living and working here, to raising their kids here, to thinking about a future here. And unless we push forward those property tax reforms that Joe was talking about, unless we really think critically about how we're making it possible for folks across the income spectrum to survive here, we're gonna lose what makes our community diverse.
It's also, it is not just the cost side, but it's also the wage side.
Absolutely. Right. And last night we were hearing about the responsibility of the city to be a good employer. I think that's essential. We need living wages and thriving wages here in Burlington. The cost of living is incredibly high. Another great way we can get at that is rent rebates for folks, rent tax credits, and making sure that, as Joe was saying, our taxation needs to be responsive to people's incomes. And you shouldn't be punished for doing something like building more housing on your lot. And we need different policies at the state level as well, right? We need healthcare, we need childcare, we need paid family leave, all of these kind of cornerstones of being a person and having a life that we've really left people to figure out themselves, and we've left big corporations to suck our bank accounts dry. That's not okay, it's not sustainable, and if we want to see this community thrive, we need to take care of our people, which happens at the city and the state level.
I got to say, and we'll follow up with what else you're hearing there, but you do not hear that. If you get the flyers from the two former Democratic, or the two Democrats nominees for the big ones, not CD, for mayoral, you don't hear anything about a critique of a system that basically leaves everybody out on their own to scuffle and shuffle, and to while all the wealth just gets appropriated at the top. And so, at the very least, I just want to say that it is really important at this level, when we're out there on the street, talking about sidewalks, talking about climate and what we can do, that folks are raising that issue. We have an obligation, because the Democrats and the rest of the system are not going to make what is necessary and possible available to people. They are not going to push that window open that says that this is acceptable ways of thinking. And I see all the time people saying at the council level, no, we shouldn't be talking about that. Don't talk about that. The narrow and the window gets smaller and smaller. And so then we fight vigorously over little stuff. Right. So what else are you hearing at the door?
Well, you just brought up something that I've been hearing a ton, that I'm sure anybody who's knocking on a door in 2024 in Burlington is hearing. We've really left people to fend for themselves. We live in a system that encourages us to leave people to fend for themselves, and it's not working. People are not feeling safe in Burlington. And for folks who have been here for a long time, for folks who have been here for a few years, we can all feel the difference, and we deserve to feel safe here. We need to make some common sense investments in harm reduction. We need to reduce the demand for drugs in Burlington. People are telling me about syringes that have led to the demolition of the playground around the corner from their house. We're hearing about, folks breaking into cars. People are struggling to find warm places to sleep, and to find sources of hope. Addiction is a symptom of hopelessness, and if we start to constructively build a way out of a cycle of struggle for everybody, then we'll see that change. I cannot tell you how many times people have, mourned not feeling safe when they walk their dog after dark, or not wanting to let their kid walk home from school alone. We need to invest in community safety for everybody, which is going to take a really broad range of solutions. I've spent a bunch of my working life in direct service helping people get food. We don't have well-networked services. If you get food, you're not necessarily getting connected to housing. You're not necessarily getting connected to health insurance or debt relief support. We have so many wonderful services in this state and in this city. We need to connect them better so that folks who do get as far as that really hard step of asking for help are really getting needs met across the spectrum.
Okay. Dan, what are you hearing?
Yeah, you said a lot of good stuff. Just wanted to outline sort of what I'm thinking and kind of what you were saying, Gene, and then pivot to that a little bit. But just
absolutely,
the systems that prioritize profit over human beings. So it's everything from healthcare to our being in debt for going to college, to just food insecurity, low wages, and people are struggling. Was just in between jobs for a couple of months, have spent at least 6 hours on the phone, figuring out health insurance, and it's not done. I still have to do at least 3 or 4 more steps just to figure that out, just so that we, don't go bankrupt if we have a medical catastrophe. And so all of these systems mean that, people are struggling. People are struggling for food, for housing, and for everything. And agree with what Lena said, that everybody deserves to feel safe in the city. I deserve to feel safe. My 2-year-old deserves to feel safe. Children deserve to feel safe. And we have to grapple with these, big systemic, issues, and take care of people today and respond appropriately. So that means doing things like not displacing the displaced, right? I just spoke with one of my friends at the Howard Center. He's like, there are no beds. There are no beds. We don't have, we need emergency low barrier shelters. Having people sleep outside in the middle of winter, children sleep outside in the middle of winter is not acceptable. I know it's a complex issue. I know that a lot of people from Vermont come to Burlington. It's the biggest city. We have to partner with the state, but making sure that people's basic needs are being met first. And I think the core of that is housing, and making sure that everybody feels safe at night, and then we can, create those wraparound services. That's like you have food, you have job development, access to healthcare, translation services, right? All of those things to make sure that everybody's taken care of and feels safe, and that everybody feels safe no matter where you live in Burlington.
Yep. So pivoting to the doors.
Yeah. A lot of it, housing in like affordability is like, especially in the New North End, is like, especially if you're on a fixed income, can they stay
These
here?
are folks that own their own homes.
Yeah, so homeowners saying like, it's like property taxes are increasing. And I think Carter spoke about that last time when he was in these chairs. But is that like that zoning, right? Like zoning is not a cure-all, but like that zoning of like, that is what makes a strong city, is to have, to legalize more housing so that people can live more closely together, so that the tax burden is shared by more people, so that we, income sensitize it. And I have a lot to learn from Joe on this stuff, but that all of the costs of the city and all these things that we want, we want more social workers, we want all of these things, cost money.
Yeah.
And if you have more people living in a smaller amount of space, then you can share those costs. And so that's like road repair and maintenance, sewer, electric, water, like all of that stuff. There's more to go around.
We had a fight over increasing the density of the city 25 years ago, where there was a plan that then Progressive Mayor Peter Clavell put forward to increase the size of the city by 60 to 66,000. It's been around 40, now it's like 45. And the outrage that existed at that time was stunning, actually. So I think that we are reaping the negative benefits of some of that, and really, from my perspective, sitting where I do, the choice is austerity or figuring out the way that we're going to build a solidarity economy that raises the money to do the care that we need to take, because we're all going to pay for it. I mean, just because you don't tax it doesn't mean that you're not going to pay for it in some other ways, and we are paying for it right now. So I always say that austerity kills, and what we need to do, and it's a global phenomena, that we need to figure out the ways to raise the funds that we need. Joe, what are you hearing at the doors?
Thanks, Gene. I'm hearing similar things, I think, to what Dan and Lana are hearing. Definitely stress about finances, about affordability in the downtown area, Ward 3, a lot of renters. Rents have increased quite a bit in this city in the last couple of years, especially with high inflation, and we don't have rent stabilization. Portland, Maine recently passed a version of rent control. I've studied it and think we should implement something similar. Emma is also running on that. I was knocking someone's door just the other day who was saying that their rent doubled, and they're on a fixed income and they're in their 80s, and the lists are full for moving into affordable housing. And it was one of the famous wealthy families who bought the house and is trying to drive this person out. And yeah, it's very frustrating, and it's not as uncommon as you might think. So affordability and the housing crisis is definitely very much on people's minds. People want to be able to own their homes, and people who live in my ward are mostly renters and don't feel like they'll necessarily ever be able to own their home, and want to just live in a society where things work different economically. And I think we need fundamental change. If you look at this upcoming austerity debate that's already being previewed at the city council, if you look at what the administration presented even last night, they were saying, how are we going to fill in this shortfall upcoming. Well, we can maybe grow the grand list a little bit. Well, we aren't developing very much more housing. Maybe we can raise a little bit more money through fees and such. They talk around the major issue, which is the way the whole tax system works and the way it's biased in favor of people who are well-to-do. Snowbirds go and save $10,000, $15,000 a year in state income tax in Florida. The state of Vermont taxes a little bit of it back through the education program, and the city of Burlington lets them off the hook otherwise. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit that would make, that would increase revenues and make things more affordable. I think starting the reappraisal process as soon as possible to rebalance after the burden was shifted towards residential properties would make sense. The golf course got a 40% tax cut and will continue to get a 40% tax cut every year until we do another reappraisal. So, why should we wait another 5 years or however long? I'm also hearing concerns about community safety. People are saying they want to be able to walk their dogs in City Hall Park, on Church Street. It's really sad to hear these stories, and I feel this, too, in our city. I certainly see what's going on. There was a shooting in City Hall Park last summer. One evening, I was in the park, I think, at the same time the evening before. People are very stressed about safety, and I'm, certainly looking into what can be done. We are hiring, trying to restaff the police department as aggressively as we can. Right now, we don't give the same level of aggression in our hiring to the unsworn positions of the CSOs and the CSLs. The social workers, for instance, don't qualify for this $15,000 hiring bonus that the traditional officers do qualify for. Maybe we should hire more aggressively. Right now, we only have 4 officers on patrol in the city center area on a good night. And we have open air drug use and other things that, lead to a perceived lack of safety as priority 3 of 3 for the police department. I read the chief's reports, and the tone in them is clearly not the tone of someone who is trying to modernize the department to meet the needs that we face in our city, which are, mostly mental health issues, substance use issues, that sort of thing. Other police chiefs in this state are making more aggressive efforts to, modernize the departments to meet the needs that cities are facing, at this stage of the opioid crisis, at this stage of the COVID crisis. So lots of discussions about safety, lots of discussions about affordability, and then certainly democratic process as well. So it's pretty heartbreaking, actually. I knock a lot of the same doors that I knocked for months, trying to get petitions signed for this anti-apartheid pledge. And so it's sad. I knocked these people's doors who were really excited to sign it, really grateful for the work I was doing, really glad that somebody was doing something. Just they are shocked to hear what happened, and very disappointed, like I am.
So the fact that you're going back and talking to them, does that reinforce a cynicism, or does it say, okay, we're going to keep fighting. Thank you so much for being out there and letting me know and carrying on the fight. How's that getting manifested?
I think people are waking up to the stark difference between progressives and Democrats in terms of respect for democratic process. I think, in a particular instance, it might be justifiable to, do more, research and try to find consensus. But if you're making this certain argument over and over and over again on every issue, for instance, the police oversight measure is not going to be on the ballot in March because we didn't have proper consensus with the police union and the high turnover police commission. This sort of argument is a conservative argument. The Democratic Party is a conservative force in this city, holding back progress, holding back democratic process. And I think people are starting to understand that, quite a bit better maybe than they used to.
Great. Before we forget, we want to talk about some of the things that are in terms of voting. So, and this is important for, I think, all of us, because all of our districts have been changed. But first of all, and I think we've got something that a slide can be shown. There you go. This is information about voting, and we'll know that the ballots are going to be mailed out on the 14th. They're not done yet. And it looks like we'll be getting people should get their ballots by the 20th of February, so in about 3 weeks. The polling places have changed. Ward 2, which now has lots of the old Ward 3, people vote at, from my world, the H.O. Wheeler School, but it's also the Integrated Arts Academy. It's a great magnet school. In your ward, Ward 3, Joe, they vote where?
Sustainability Academy.
And that's on?
It's on North Street.
Right? Yeah. And your ward has changed. There are a number of people who used to be in Ward 2, maybe some who have been were in Ward 5. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the old North End used to be split. Sort of the western portion was in 3 and the eastern portion was in 2, and now it's split sort of very differently. So
North and South.
North and South. I spoke to a voter just this morning who told me that they, if they hadn't spoken to me, they would have gone to the wrong polling place.
Okay. And Dan, you're Ward 4.
St. Mark's Catholic Church on North Ave.
Okay. And Lena?
At the Burlington Electric Department on Pine Street, and yeah, many folks who live in King Maple, which is the neighborhood I live in, are either in 3 or 5. Look at the map, you may have moved without actually moving. It's really just a reminder that the King Maple neighborhood has long been sort of split up to make it such that we don't have the political representation we deserve. So
if
thinking about that when I look at the map too.
Yep, if you guys get elected, know that you will lose many battles. So this redistricting was a battle that I fought and lost. Non-citizens who are legal residents in the United States, so they live here in Burlington with legal status, are for the first time allowed to vote. We had a CCTV program on that just recently, and there's information at the clerk treasurers. You can see that in the 3rd bullet up there. And so that's really, really important. And the last thing in terms of the election is that we continue not only to have early voting allowed and mail-in voting, but same-day voter registration. So a person who is a resident of the city of Burlington can actually register on election day and vote. And we also now, and who has a 3-way race in this here?
I think I do.
You do. So we have ranked choice voting. So it does behoove us to appeal to all folks. This was a democratic reform that I was happy to have shepherded through the charter change process, and 68% of the people voted. It may be a reason why they want to keep things off the ballot, because things like that. I think that we've been told that we're out of time, and so let me thank you all for sharing the time here. I think you guys are great candidates, and I look forward to having you sit and help me out.
Thanks, Gene.
Thank you.